Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of The Sweet House, but this episode is obviously a solo episode and I'm going to be talking to myself as I talk to you all, which is kind of my motto when creating content because even when I'm interviewing guests, I'm asking questions to get answers that are going to help me in my own life. And so when I do speaking engagements, I am speaking to the audience, but oftentimes it is a speech that I have written for myself. So I did a speech recently on self-love. And when I tell y'all I was preaching to my own choir on things that I knew that I needed to do, that was the case. And so today's episode is simply that. And if you're watching this, we're probably 70 something days into the new year. But as of today that I'm actually recording this, we are 65 days into the new year. And from my corporate background, I'm used to making 30, 60, 90-day plans. And now we're 60 something days into the new year. And I feel like I took a rocket ship all the way to 2026, even though it's still 2025. And only March 5th of this new year. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are feeling the same way and feeling just like this year is going fast. The world is crazy. Life is crazy. But then there's also lots of good things in the midst of it. So I just wanted to share with you guys some things that are going on in my world and how I'm choosing to approach this new year. So first of all, instead of going out on New Year's Eve, I decided to have a vision board party with Mr. Sweet. And we made vision boards. And first of all, can we talk about how expensive magazines are now? Magazines are like $20 and they used to be like $5. So I had to search all of East Nashville to find some magazines to create this vision board. And then I found some. And I also had a couple magazines at the house. And this is an occasion when you end up on your own vision board. So that's me right in the middle. And then my word of the year is joy. And I chose joy because last year I went into the new year with very straight-laced, stringent goals. And I kind of disappointed myself. I set exact dates for things that I wanted to get done, like the podcast. In 2023, I recorded 2 seasons of the Sweet House podcast. And so I was on a fast momentum. I knew that I didn't want to record every day, but I wanted to record in seasons. And so the goal was to kind of keep that same momentum for 2024. And so I said, okay, on X date in 2024, I'm launching season 3 of the Sweet House podcast. But budgeting, which is also a word that my daughter has now messed up on my vision board, and some other things just did not comply. And so I was not able to start the new year launching season 3 of the Sweet House podcast when I thought that it was going to launch. So I had these straight-laced goals that I had to throw out of the window. Very disappointing, very disheartening. And if you're an entrepreneur, I definitely just wanted to just be like, you know what? This is just not for me. Maybe I need to go work for somebody so they can tell me what to do. Because a lot of times in entrepreneurship, we're looking for somebody to just give us the direction and give us the outline and we'll just do the work. But that's just not how it goes. So my word of the year this year is joy. And then I also just chose a bunch of other phrases and things that resonate with how I want to go into this new year. So I wanted to share a couple of those with you all. And of course, entrepreneur is again at the top of the board because I didn't stop last year. My resilience kicked in and I kept going. And content, here we are at the beginning of the year and I'm already into season 4, episode 4, which is this episode where I am sharing the vulnerability of how I approached last year. And then my word of the year, joy. And like I said, if this is not motivation for you, it's motivation for me, which is why I make all the content to stay motivated myself. But here it is. It's me in the middle of my own vision board. So I know that I'm capable and I'm reminding myself by sharing this with you all of what I'm able to do. So that's that. And then I also have a sweet little prayer journal. And I have to show you guys, I've been prayer journaling for years, but this is actually my new prayer journal for 2025. And this one came about on a brand trip my first brand trip of 2025, which was the last week in January, which did not come about until the week before the last week in January. So when I say everything is rocket ship fast this year and coming out of nowhere, I think it's because I chose how to change my approach to this entire year and also change my approach to my work ethic and my work spirit towards things. So joy's my word of the year. This is my prayer journal. 2 things I highly recommend that you guys do. It is not too late to do a vision board. It's not too late to create the life that you want from this. And you might be living on the vision board and living in the prayers that you prayed for. So I wanted to share those 2 things with you guys to kick off this solo episode of the year. So we're back in business, the prayer journal to the left and the vision board on the right and me in the middle. I guess these are my guests for the podcast today, and I am okay with that. So back to me not being able to start this podcast the way that I wanted to start it in 2024. So Erin, my producer, called me sometime at the beginning of the summer, and she said that she had a guest that she wanted me to interview. And so it kind of forced me back into the studio. And she doesn't know this. She's sitting on the other side of the camera, but it forced me back into the studio because I have a spreadsheet. It's a working spreadsheet that I always share with the studio. But I don't want you guys to think that I wasn't working during this time. I was working on the podcast and I was vision projecting who I wanted to be on the podcast. The names were in the spreadsheet. It was a working, living document, and I was working in real time to make it happen. But again, I walked into this new year feeling like I need to be on these strategic dates or else I'm not doing it at all. So I kind of had a very negative mentality towards the podcast at that point because things weren't going according to plan. So when Erin called me with this particular guest and she's like, I need you to interview her and she's going to be here on said date, I was like, oh, okay, so we're doing this. It's happening. So it kind of changed my approach to having such stringent guidelines for myself, and I just had to work with the flow of the work. And so me kicking off season 3 in 2024 with that first interview really catapulted me to go ahead and start booking everyone else that I wanted on season 3 of the podcast. Now, season 3 did not come out until the end of the summer of 2024. So it did not come out at the beginning of the year like I thought it was going to come out. Y'all, I had like a whole launch party on my vision board and on my goals list that was supposed to happen like March 1st, had all these things that were supposed to happen. I won't go there too much today because I did put out a solo episode to kick off season 3 where I actually talked about all the things that went wrong in 2024 and how I had to become resilient to work through them. But that's how it happened. That's how I shifted my own work approach. And so season 3 happened. Season 3 ended in December of 2024 with a bang. I got a partnership with Google Fiber, which is a cool tech company. And I got to bring in a couple of other of my podcast friends for that particular podcast. So it was just a moment of joy for me that, first of all, I made it through 2024. I got to work with a tech company, and then I got to bring some friends along to also share the ins and the outs of podcasting, and creatives who understand that this world that we work in is just the world of chaos, pandemonium, and somehow we function amidst it all. But
You didn't become resilient in 2024, by the way.
I don't think I became resilient in 2024, but I definitely... I don't know. Motherhood, first of all, I think has made me more resilient because you can't control anything with that. But I think with work life, for sure, entrepreneurship, I finally gave into just this. I have to flow. I have to flow with it. I cannot plan every ounce of this. I mean, we're currently going through something behind the scenes right now with the podcast that I am just like, I want to say something that I'm not going to say on camera. But I know I can't say that. And so I am just re-strategizing and reframing and counting it all joy back to my vision board, because I know so much of the things that are on this board are going to happen because I've already proved that I'm capable of making that happen, because that's me. And I was in a magazine that I put on my own vision board. So I know that everything's going to come full circle for me at the right time. So there's that. So Erin, how do you feel knowing that you pushed me into season 3?
I didn't know that. I really didn't. I just thought it made sense, and I maybe selfishly missed seeing you, but also had someone in town that I really wanted you to interview. I had no idea that was the catapulting point for the season.
But I also think the lesson in that is to work with people who can push you, which is also kind of wild because it's on the vision board and it says, I want to work with great people who can inspire me, push me, and vice versa. And that is a quote from Rick Ross. So, I just feel like it's all happening in my favor because I chose to think much differently about this year versus being like, it has to happen this way. It has to look this way on this timeline. It's just not feasible when you think about doing stuff like that. And I think how you choose to accept the work is also something else I want to talk to you guys about, because in December, I got an offer from a brand that I've been working with for a very long time, and they asked me to create content for an ad in Times Square in exchange for a trip to New York for me to go create more content of my reaction to seeing myself in Times Square in exchange for the trip. And that's it. So no actual monetary compensation, just in exchange for the trip. So I sat there for a minute and I'm like, well, how cool is that? Who else can say that they've been offered an opportunity to be featured on an ad in Times Square? But then I said, but I'm doing all the work and I'm not actually being compensated for anything besides a chance to see myself in Times Square. But that's not necessarily compensate. I can't pay the bills with that. Let's just be real. So I declined the offer, and I did tell the brand why, that I felt like this was just not a fair negotiation for me or a fair work arrangement. And so I had to let that go. But I also think, again, back to me reframing how I want to work and who I want to work with. It helped me open the doors for something else major that came about also during that time. So in December, I started having conversations about going to speak to NASDAQ, Microsoft, and LinkedIn employees at their annual summit that they did in February, the first week in February. So I'm like, okay, so I closed this one door on an opportunity that a lot of people would say is a major opportunity. You probably shouldn't have passed that up. You're never going to see yourself in Times Square, X, Y, and Z. But I closed the door because I felt like I'm opening the door and telling the universe what I want, even though I didn't know what it looked like. And so I started to have this conversation about my speaking engagement at NASDAQ, which, by the way, you guys, is in Times Square. And then in January, I confirmed the speaking engagement that I would be speaking in Times Square to tech professionals who work for those three companies. So how cool is that I shut down one situation and then opened up a can of worms that were really good worms in the other situation? And so back to my vision board, I just think that you have to position yourself for the things that you want in this life. And none of us know what we're doing. We can do vision boards. We can write in our prayer journals. Sometimes you can do it all, which is how I felt last year. I was like, okay, I'm not sure what else you want me to do, Lord, because I have done it all. I've written everything down. I have bullet pointed it. I have written it in calendars. I have done it all. And I just feel like we're not going anywhere. I feel like I am doing all this in vain. I remember having a conversation with my sister, and I literally was having a breakdown on the phone, just being like, this is just not fair. And it's not how I planned it. It's not how I worked. This is not how I've worked towards what I want out of life. It's not presenting how I want it to present. So I'm glad I had the year that I had last year, because this year I am much more open to the possibilities of what will come when you do choose to own your self-worth and understand that your work is not in vain. So I went to New York for that speaking engagement, and then I also booked another speaking engagement to 150 women here in Nashville to talk about self-love. And then I also went to Charlotte, North Carolina to speak to over 100 other women to talk about influencer marketing and also love and connectivity with other women and creatives in our world. And so the doors have continued to open for me for the things that I've put out. So we kicked off season 4 of the Sweet House podcast with Grammy nominated duo War and Treaty, and then I had on WNBA star Alicia Clark. And then the list goes on and on and on. I can tell you the season gets better and better. We're already planning some really fun stuff for the end of the season, but none of it goes according to plan. And so having the resilience to ebb and flow is something that's helped me through all of this.
For the people who aren't master manifestors to the extent that you are, obviously I know what you mean when you say, I turned down this deal or turned down this opportunity because I wanted to show the universe what I wanted. Can you dive in a little bit deeper? What message would you have been sending to the universe if you had taken it?
I think if I had taken that deal, I would have sent to the universe that I'm going to continue to just work without return. I think I would have told the universe, continue to send me people who want me to do this level of work with no adequate return on investment. And so when I think about it, I'm like, well, I was obviously good enough to be considered to be on an ad in Times Square on the behalf of this brand, but I'm just not good enough to pay for that kind of work. And to give you all perspective, when companies do ads in Times Square, they're spending a lot of money to get the ad up in Times Square. But before the ad even ever hits Times Square, they are spending money on photography, videography, models, stylists, makeup artists, and so many other components. Consulting firms and everybody just to get the one ad up in Times Square. So to be asked to do all of that to create a reel that was going to go in Times Square, I just knew that's not sending a message to the universe that I'm okay with it. When I declined it, I literally was shutting it all down. I'm like, absolutely not. Because I know what it strategically takes to get an ad in Times Square. And so as far as the manifestation of it, I think that, you have to use your common sense. It's just that simple. You have to know that it takes a lot for a company to get something like that up there. And, I'm not willing to be the blood sacrifice.
Yeah, they pay everyone except for who's actually up there.
Yeah, pay everybody except for the one that's up there. And then also, to that respect, I want to talk about fleeting moments, because everybody uses social media for fleeting moments, all the announcements and all the things. And I've had all the announcements. I have gotten to meet really cool people, interview Dolly Parton, and do really cool things. And so these moments on social media can be fleeting. And if they don't have meaning and momentum behind them, then I'm not interested. I think a lot of people want the gratification of telling people everything that they're doing without necessarily doing the work on the back end, because they are addicted to the dopamine that they get when they see all the likes and the comments and the shares. And that's just not my forte. I am somebody who would much rather work on everything in silence, and also know that when I get in the magazine, it's because the work that I did behind the scenes was some hard work and it was worth it. So let's talk about working in silence, since I brought it up. A lot of people had no idea that the Sweet Agency was around until Super Bowl of 2025. And I will say that I kind of got catapulted into that too. And when I say that, I mean management. I've managed myself for years. I have trusted my own goals for myself, my own negotiating for myself, my own business expertise for myself. So I've just not necessarily trusted that anyone else would deliver for my business in the same way that I would. But I've often been the point of inference for all of my friends who are also influencers, and they want me to read through their contracts. They want me to negotiate their rates and all the other business that comes along with influencer marketing that you guys don't know about. A lot of you guys think we take pictures for a living, but there are a lot of logistics on this side. So I've always been that person that my friends in the business come to help them sort out these types of things. And as you guys have witnessed, I have been doing this for over a decade and manifested my business out into other things, including this podcast. And so people trust me with this level of business, which kind of led me into management. So my husband and his friends, his childhood friend Darren, and some of their friends started a podcast, and they've been at it since 2020. And I have watched them grow their business, which that's the thing. It's so cool to see people who start as creators and then their creation turns into a business. Because I think a lot of people want to be influencers or they want to be creatives because they want to start it as a business, versus having the passion and the tenacity to do the dirty work, which is creating the content and staying consistent and making something happen. And so it was a no-brainer when I looked at them and I was like, oh, they're serious about this. I don't have to tell them to actually create content. They're going to do that part. Then I can take that part and run with the business side of it. So that birthed the Sweet Agency, which came alive in January of 2024. And again, it was something that I just didn't want to put out into the world because I knew that I was working very diligently on it on the back end. And I wanted to work at my own pace and also under my own direction without having the outside noise. A lot of times when you take things to the internet and you make these huge announcements, then you have to live up to everyone's expectations of your huge announcement. And for me, I obviously was, like I said, thrust into this new role with this new job, essentially. And I didn't want to have all of that. I wanted to be able to work in peace. And to me, for you to come up with the best outcome for whatever you're working on, you do need to be able to work in peace and in silence and diligently. So the Sweet Agency did not start as of this year, as you guys have seen it announced on social media. It's actually been in fruition for a long time. I would say even before it became an actual LLC last year. But this year, the guys, Raw Room, you guys should go follow them. They actually were able to collaborate with Google Fiber. So I was the first catalyst to work with Google Fiber. As I was telling you guys, they sponsored my last podcast episode in December. And then that opened the door for me to start negotiations for the Raw Room to have a collaboration with them in February of 2025. So again, everything is starting to build off of each other. These are building blocks that I'm taking through time and also resilience and all the other things that I've told you guys about. So on February of 2025, the Raw Room hosted the largest Super Bowl party that Broadway, which is also known as the Neon Neighborhood, has ever seen. And the building was packed from the first floor all the way to the rooftop. And it was just such a cool thing to see because, again, I was working on my own accord, not with a lot of just adoration and cheers and all of that, because when you work in silence, you don't get all of that. So you're doing all these things day by day and nobody's standing on the sidelines saying, keep going, you got this, and you're doing a great job. I wasn't getting any of that last year. Actually, I was getting lots of rejection for all the pitches that I was sending. So I was working through all of that too. So to actually see them be able to do this live event off of the internet and bring out that kind of crowd, and to know that I was the one who really pushed this and brought this into fruition was a highlight of my 2025. And like I said, 2025 is already a rocket ship, and I just that was just probably one of the little cinder blocks that sent me off into the moon. So that's where we're going in 2025. And I'm excited to continue. Power is also one of my words. So I'm excited to continue the momentum and the power behind that. But that's how it came about, in silence. And I just wanted to share that with you guys because we live in the day and age of social media. And also, as an influencer myself, I think everyone wants you to share everything that you're going through and share everything that you're working on. And you just don't need to do that. Sometimes you need to keep things to yourself. Sometimes you need to work out the logistics and you need to consult trusted advisors for whatever you're working on before you go live with it. Because once you go live with it, you've opened it up to a whole lot of commentary that you might not need to hear in order to stay motivated to bring what you want into fruition. So keep that in mind as you're working towards your goals this year. All right, so back to our 30, 60, 90-day plan, because like I said, by the time you're watching this, we're clearly 70-something days into the new year. And so for the next 30 days, I do have a plan. I actually have things that I'm working on all the way, I would say, until May or June-ish. And that's just because even in the podcast world, when I'm planning a season, I have to plan for the weeks in advance. So the recording dates and then the go live dates and all of these different things. So some strategies that I think that you guys should put in place are using AI. I use ChatGPT. I use scheduling tools. I use OtterBox for Zoom meetings. There are a bunch of different things that I am tapping into. AI is a very robust industry full of tools that we can all utilize. You can use AI for Canva if you're making any social media graphics and all that kind of stuff. But that's one of the things that I learned when I was speaking at NASDAQ. They talked heavily about the advancement of business relying on AI. So I'll tell you that much. And then, like I said, I think that you guys should definitely make your vision boards and create your list of things that you want to do for this year, but also surround yourself with people who want to see you win, which brings me to my last point, and then I'm going to close this podcast. But everyone wants to go on a coffee date. Everybody wants to get close to people. So I kind of want to talk about that because there is this age of also opportunistic communication. And so I think we should explore that because people don't want to waste their time. So if you want someone to go to a coffee date, or if you want to meet somebody for lunch and you want somebody to meet you at the same business level or the same business objective that you're on, then I need you guys to make sure that you are at that level of business as well. Like, I don't invite people to the Sweet House podcast who are coming into a closet to record with some foam on the wall like we're on Hustle and Flow. That's not what this setup is. It's a very nice setup. I'm investing in my business and I'm asking people to come here and share their stories with me because I see that they're also investing in their business. But I bring this up because I think that we're in this day and age of networking with people, sending people DMs. We have easy access to whoever we want to reach out to. You can message people on LinkedIn. You can connect with people on Facebook and all these different things. And it's wonderful. But I think it's also very important to note that you need to have your stuff together whenever you start asking people for stuff. Even if you were going to ask for investments from an investor, you can't just go ask an investor for the investments. You're going to have to come with your books aligned. Your accountant is going to have to make sure that everything it adds up. The math is mathing and everything adds up for you to be able to close that deal. So this year, whenever you're networking with people or trying to have conversations with people over coffee, make sure that you're coming to the table with the cream, the sugar, and everything else. But I am excited for all of you this year. I'm excited for you guys to continue to learn and hear the stories on the Sweet House podcast, and then also all of the speaking engagements that I've been doing this year. I'm excited to just continue to pour into people. I'm speaking at my first podcast conference this year. I am also speaking at Vanderbilt again on influencer marketing. I will continue to show up in the community. I'm on a few different boards here, so you'll see me. And that's something else that I'll tell you guys is to not only be active on the internet, but be active in real life, because that's how you win. It's the that's the math equation that you really need to make it all happen. So for your next 30, 60, 90 days, I hope that you have some tools and that you gather some of my experiences and go create your own experiences, because I know you can do it. I know you can get in the right mindset, and I know that you can win all 2025 and be on the rocket ship to 2026 like me. I get a lot of questions on people asking if it's too late to be in the creator economy, to be influencers, podcasters, and to do anything of the nature. And my question to them is it something that you really want to do? Because if it is something that you really want to do, I think you should just do it, and the rest of the work will flow to you. I was actually at my husband's great-grandmother's 110th birthday, and all the family went to her home church in Olive Branch, Mississippi. And the church is a tiny church, and honestly, without all the family there probably would have been 10 members in the audience who also served as the choir members and the ushers at the church. And so when I thought about it, I'm like, how is this church staying open with so few people at this church? But it's been his family's stomping grounds and their church for years. But when I thought about it, I'm like, we live in the South. There's a church on every corner, and somehow all these churches are staying open. And I'm using that example as well because I was in the gym this morning and I was sitting next to a pastor, and he starts telling me about his church, and he's like, yeah, we don't have very many members, but I show up every Sunday, and I've been showing up every Sunday for 26 years to preach to people. And so I said, you know what, that's really cool. And I thought back to just a few days ago, sitting on the pews in Olive Branch at my husband's great-grandmother's church, and I'm thinking the same thing. So if I had to tell anybody who's trying to figure out if there is room, if there's a place for them, there absolutely is a place for you. And I think of that even with social media. This preacher is getting up and preaching to his audience of I don't know how many people. He said it was a very small church, so the assumption is, I'm going to say probably 50 people, if that, but he's still getting up and doing it because he has a passion and a will to get up and do something that he wants to do. So if you want to be a food blogger, or you want to be a sports analyst, or any of these things, you don't have to have the title, or you don't have to have the people to make it happen. You are the resource to make it happen. But you have to know that, and you have to operate out of a place of abundance to bring that into fruition. And you can't rely on the outside voices to give you an amen, because you might not get the amen. You can ask for the amen, but I think it's you continuously showing up every chance you get. The news did a story on Alex's great-grandmother, and they asked her how she's been able to live for 110 years. And she said it's because she went to church every Sunday. And so when you think about anything that we're doing, you operate in abundance, but then you also operate in consistency, and the rewards do come. But so many of us are willing to just give up, throw in the towel, without giving ourselves a chance to be a part of the abundance that is available to us. So I think even when you create your vision boards this year, that you might want to put what you want or who you are at the top of it. I have women in business here. I have wellness woman here. I have home enthusiast here. I have best friend here. I've got entrepreneur. I have mom. I have these titles for myself that I'm not looking for the world to necessarily create, but I'm doing it because that's who I want to be. And so I think that you all should be who you want to be. And lastly, I'm going to say that when my daughter, I watch the podcast back before they go live to you all, because I'm usually picking out social media clips, and I edit all of my own photos. So I am very hands-on in this business. And my daughter sometimes is sitting there with me, and she'll point at the screen and she'll go, "Oh, that's mommy." And it's so cool to see her. And now I'm going to cry, but it's so cool to see a 3-year-old acknowledge who I am, because she's reaffirming to me that I am who I'm supposed to be, and I don't necessarily need the world's confirmation to live in that abundance and that truth. And so there is room for all of us, whether you're going to start a church of 10 people that lasts for over a century, and one of your church members is 110 years old, or what. There is room for all of us to do what we came here to do. So I hope that all of you guys are doing that, because I know I am, and I'm not going to stop doing that. because I know that that's the power of joy.